Welcome to another installment of Centering Possibility Live. I'm excited to be here with you all again tonight, whenever you might be watching this. I'm Cesare Warren. I am a professor, a singer-songwriter, and author of Centering Possibility in Black Education, being released on Teachers College Press, Columbia University in April 2021. And today, I have a fantastic guest, another artist who has contributed to the book. We know that this series is about celebrating and spotlighting the artists whose art lines the pages of this text. And today I'm excited to bring on screen none other than Dr. Tony Keith Jr. What's happening?
Hey, what's up, brother? What's up?
Good. It's good to see you. It's good to have you with us this afternoon, this morning, this evening.
Likewise.
Watching this.
Likewise. I bring you greetings from my kitchen in Chocolate City, man.
Chocolate City. So we've had folks from all over the country. So you're the first person from DC. So I'm excited to have DC representing. So tell us a little bit about who is Dr. Tony Keith Jr.
Who's Dr. Tony Keith Jr.? It's interesting because Dr. Tony Keith Jr. is first an artist. I'm learning to say that out loud more often. I walk into every space as an artist. And as an artist, I'm a poet. I use language and literacy as my way of making art, if that makes sense. And so I was a complicated kind of story, but I'm from Washington, D.C. I grew up on Bowling Air Force Base. It's a wild story, but my parents were young, newlyweds, and Pop was in the military, and we had free housing from the city they grew up in. And so I grew up in a space surrounded by people who look very different than what DC looked like. By that, I met people from all over the place. So anyway, parents split up. DC was a tough time. Drugs, cocaine. Pop got sick, addicted, and absent, and we were forced to move to Prince George's County, Maryland, out in the suburbs, and that was the first time I had began to really encounter things like racism in education. I had never been in a space where I had like mostly white teachers and things. And I was also I'm also gay, and some, I was experiencing homophobia and stuff. So anyway, the narrative goes, I began to write poetry to deal with all the transitions and the changes that were taking place in my life. You know what I mean? And so I didn't realize it was more therapy. And then once I began to see it as an art form, like something I could perform and do, that became like around the era of Love Jones and HBO Def Poetry Jam, you know what I mean? And so anyway, so my point is I've just always been a poet, always been an artist, always claimed DC as hometown, and I'm an educator. Not in the traditional sense. I've done a little bit of everything, y'all, from running community-based nonprofit organizations, after-school programs, and tutoring. I've also been a college professor. I've taught courses on hip-hop culture. I've taught racism and diversity and social justice kind of things. I've taught English. I've also been an academic advisor in higher educations. I also worked in a couple of high schools. And so anyway, I've just sort of done K through 16 kinds of things. And now, to bring us to the present, I work full-time for myself as an educational MC, which came out of my doctoral research about the intersection of hip-hop, spoken word poetry, Black language, and possibilities for education, specifically thinking about Black kids. And so that's that, which was probably a long story, but that's what I felt like saying.
Yeah, listen, it's okay to be a jack of all trades and to exercise your gifts in multiple. If the pandemic hasn't taught us anything else, it should have taught us that we need to exercise all of our gifts, do all the things that's in us to do, because there's no moment, there's no day is promised. So I'm here for all of that. I'm here for all of that. That being said, what's bringing you joy? It seems like you're quite busy, but what is bringing you joy?
Yeah, what's bringing me joy is, I think, being busy. Seriously. I mean, I think the story that I just kind of quickly try to thread through is really about, bringing, having joy right now is really just being able to just be myself, as authentically as possible, as Black as I am, as Black as I want to be, all the hip hop, all the spoken word. I can speak the way that I want. The title that I've derived for myself as a professional, as an educational MC, someone who, masters conditions in education with the spoken words. Come on, right? Like the fact that I have language to describe who I am brings me a great joy. I get to be myself, and it's dope. And so right now what's bringing me joy is being here in this space talking about possibilities in Black education, because I feel like I literally am walking it. When kids say, "Oh, I want to grow up to be an NMC," that to me is like, "Oh, that does a thing," because that language didn't like exist before. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's some possibilities there. And so for me, I'm happy to be here.
No, that's super dope, and I'm glad you said that, because before there was a Tony Keith Jr., I had never heard of an Ed MC. So
Exactly.
you are giving life to a space that I'm sure has always existed somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
But by giving it language, you're also now creating a platform and being representative.
Yes.
So people can, I can get a
Yes.
PhD and I can do hip hop and I can be a spoken word artist, and these things don't
Yes.
have to be antagonizing to one another.
Yes. Which is interesting, because that's, if you think about the reason why I started my story with all the complicatedness, because I was like, usually that's what I would have to tell people to explain who I am and what I do. It was like, well, I a little bit of this, I did all that. When I can just be like, oh, I'm an NMC.
The end.
Okay, Google it. Literally, it's out there. You know what I mean?
That's dope. That's dope. So right there in that vein, you graciously contributed some of your art to the book, and a little bit later folks will get to see you actually perform that piece of art. Why did you want to participate and contribute to this book on centering possibility in Black education?
First I must say, I received an invitation from someone who believes in centering possibilities in Black education. So, brother, because of your invitation, I just need to make that really, really clear. Because of your reputation, your invitation, I knew that what you were putting together was designed to do something very liberating, right? And so for me, I'm just thinking about, oh, this is a liberatory project. This is something that is deemed to like inspire and serve justice and do a thing. And so for me, I'm like, oh man, to contribute a poem. Not only would be like a major contribution, but I wanted to make sure that the kind of poem that I contributed could be translated in a couple different ways, right? And so I am fascinated with, not fascinated with, because it sounds like I'm on the outside of myself, but like the way Black people speak, not all of us, right? But like this African-American vernacular English and the way that it like rolls off our tongue, and how dope it is to be like, hey, I be like this and she be like that, and everybody like that, just out to me, it sounds beautiful. But when written, we don't see it. And this is the thing, we don't see it, right? And so for me, I was like, yo, if I could contribute a piece, wouldn't it be dope if I could contribute a piece that was written in the way that I speak? When I'm in my neighborhood and around my family, and I don't have to code switch into these, white spaces where I have to adjust my language and enunciate myself. And I'm like, that, for me, when I'm thinking about the possibilities of Black education, is, wow, wouldn't it be dope if Black kids could read books that had their language in it? Wouldn't it be dope if they could read poetry that had their language in it? Like, wouldn't it be dope if that were the case? And so that for me is what it was. It was your invitation, and what I'm kind of already thinking about these days. I'm trying to liberate these babies, man. I'm thinking about liberating these Black kids, man. Like, speak how you speak. Please speak how you speak.
Be who you are. And that's such an important part of the book. This book, as I've said, if you've been watching these episodes of Centering Possibility Live, I've said it and I'll continue to say it. A significant aim, or a major aim of the book, is to recast Blackness and Black people as full of beauty, as full of wonder. Yes. And that accounts for and includes our language, how we speak with and share love with our friends and family in our neighborhood, in spaces that belong to us, where we don't have to show up or mute aspects of our personhood to belong.
Yes.
Our language is such a significant part of that. So I love that your poem, your piece comes in the chapter where I talk about storytelling, and how storytelling is the currency of Black culture, past, present, and future.
Oh, yes.
And so I think the piece is so important. So tell us a little bit, set us up. Tell us a little bit about this piece and what the piece, from your perspective, as people are reading your words and now they'll get to see you perform those words. How does that connect to possibility in Black education from your perspective?
Ooh, oh, goodness gracious. I just got chills, because that is a really exciting question. Because the first thing that I'm thinking about is, within the context of hip hop, and I have to sort of theoretically situate it that way, within the 5 elements of, DJing, emceeing, breakdancing, graffiti, and the 5th element being knowledge of self, right? That notion of like, knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, your history, your culture, your language, seriously, once I really I got deep, like dove deep into my PhD studies around hip hop and spoken word poetry, and really like getting into race and racism and education and all that stuff, and like beginning to understand more and more about my story, and like, you know, the ways in which the academy and, you know, educational spaces where I was in, you know, classrooms with mostly white teachers who told me I spoke wrong, or I thought wrong, or I was writing incorrectly. Just all these, like all the narratives that I was hearing in my head, that I was like bad at this and I must perform in a particular way. Like not knowing, at least as a kid, that that was like a response to racism, white supremacy kind of thing. So anyway, but my point is, I realized that when I was working on my dissertation, I'm studying, I'm like, yo, I had this question of how in the world did enslaved Africans learn English? And I know, you know, because, you know, there's this notion of like black kids speak wrong, right? Don't speak to the standard, or there's like this gap. And I'm like, but enslaved African people were already speaking their own languages before they were quite literally stolen, captured, and forced to learn American Standard English without any form of without access to the written word. They weren't given books, let's be clear. So without the written word, they needed the spoken word, right? And so then I'd start, you know, get into the history of, you know, Negro spirituals and hiding messages and songs and poems, and, you know, thinking about, you know, griots and griots in Africa. Like I'm just thinking about that notion of like, yo, being a descendant of these people, I have this particular gift that clearly came from them, right? Which means I can flex, now that I know that, now I have that knowledge of myself, I can flex that joint however I want now in academic spaces and community-based spaces. It's my language, right? It's published, right? It's in books, right? I got articles coming out about it. So I'm thinking about, again, possibly black education. So that's what this poem was about. So when I wrote this, to put it in context, I was working on my dissertation, and I was having it was an inner dialogue. A lot of my poems are inner dialogue, right? So while I'm writing these academic pieces, these, you know, standard academic writing, there's a dialogue taking place in my head, like, man, I don't feel like doing this shit. I'm tired of this. It's exhausting trying to flex my language, and that side conversation becomes poems for me sometimes. And so what you all are going to see or hear is the inner dialogue as I'm working on my dissertation. This is the inner dialogue that's taking place inside of my head, and yeah. And my audience is yeah.
So
yeah.
I'll just say to your last point, while I was writing this book is academically grounded, it's intellectually rich, but it is not an academic text in the sense that it's a bunch of jargon. Right. I really try to tap into my creative. You're getting Cesare, you're not just getting Dr. Warren, and that was a struggle. The voices, yes. How I wanted to communicate ideas, and sometimes Dr. Warren won, and I try it more often for Cesare to win, because I really want for any young person, any elder, any caregiver, any person in the world who wants to learn more, to pick up this book and access it.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to share your piece, Code Switch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna transition us here,
right,
and transition us off. So everybody, this is Code Switched.
PhD student education, and my research is about spoken word poetry and young people and racism and education and hip hop. And so these moments like legit just get me crazy excited. And so this poem is called Code Switch. So shout out to any black or brown person that's ever had to change your language in front of white people. Right? I don't have to imagine what it's like to be black, to be brilliant, to be misunderstood by the same people who only seem to understand you after you've exfoliated, after you've scraped yourself down to the white meat, to expose that layer of skin where color and soul meet, where tongues split, pitchforks learn to spit and speak and sing and scream and stand on stages while the world bets and bids and bargains and debates about your ebony brain and your black boisterous body, and you begin to question your value, asking, is speaking like this even worth it? Look, I know what it's like to not know what words mean. I know what it's like to have letters chained together on paper, heavy, just sitting there still and silent, not moving. I know what it's like to carry the burden of words on your back, to bow to prevent your bones from breaking beneath them. But I also know what it's like to know what words mean. I know what it's like to watch letters break dance on blue lines that look like horizontal skies cutting through white space. I know what it's like when words fly off the page and land on your face. And I know all of this because I'm a descendant of enslaved Africans. A people separated by their tongues on plantations on purpose. A people who publish translations about their liberation through poems and songs on purpose. A people who prayed and protested and protected all the parts of black speech we couldn't speak in public, but we spoke in private through the spoken word on purpose. There's a purpose to this poem. So white people, please stop telling me that your great-great-great-grandparents are Polish and Irish and Italian, because it comes from a place of privilege, and I don't know what place. I don't know what village of Mother Africa your ancestors pillaged, what great price they paid for my great-great-great-grandparents on that stage, but I know that I come from a people who protested and protected while they were being purchased on purpose. Y'all, there's a purpose to this poem. This poem is an apology for every beautiful black word I try to camouflage in white words. For every moment of my being, I ain't know who I was being, because being black meant that I was more than the white worlds that I be in, and being as though I'm a human being with a tongue trapped in a cage that ain't asked to be in. His theory tells me it was beat in, but the beat in my bones made sure I kept this beat in. So this poem then is an apology for the intellectual abuse that began in my youth. But my bad, brother. Look at you. Standing on stages like your ancestors tortured. Flipping, folding, balancing two different languages in the air. The American standard and black savoir-faire. It sure is impressive. It sure is distinguished. It sure is debonair. But to capture its essence and truth, it can't be done in writing. You need an audience there. A sanctuary of people willing to watch you wrestle and reconcile with yourself and your words to produce a publication so worthy of praise it deserves an applause. And I propose that I'm the purpose of this poem. Thank you very much.